My brother died believing you despised him. I will not let you dishonor his widow as well. Duke Alistair Ashcombe spoke before the entire Blackmere household, his voice carrying from the marble steps to the servants gathered beneath the gallery. Beside him stood Lady Lavinia Ashcombe, the widow of his younger brother, dressed in mourning silk, despite nearly 18 months having passed since her husband's death. Duchess Evelyn remained at the foot of the stairs, one hand resting upon the leather ledger she had carried into the hall. She had expected an argument behind closed doors. She had not expected her husband to summon the servants, stewards, and senior tenants to witness her humiliation. "Dishonor her?" Evelyn asked. "I requested an explanation for £12,000 missing from the eastern villages." A faint murmur passed through the hall. Lavinia lowered her eyes. Her fingers tightened around a lace handkerchief, as if Evelyn had struck her. Alistair descended one step. Those villages suffered after Edmund's death. Lavinia used the money to settle obligations he left behind. "What obligations? You questioned my brother while he lived. Now you question his widow when he cannot defend her." "I am questioning figures, Alistair. Figures do not become sacred because a dead man wrote them." His expression hardened. There had been a time when Alistair admired that precision in her. During the first years of their marriage, he had sat beside Evelyn until midnight while she untangled the debts inherited from his father. He had kissed the ink from her fingertips and called her the only person capable of making order from Blackmere's chaos. But Edmund's death had changed him, or perhaps it had merely given him permission to resent what he had once needed. Alistair turned to the household solicitor. "Mr. Bellamy, read the order." The gray-haired solicitor hesitated before unfolding the document. By instruction of His Grace, the Duke of Blackmere, Lady Lavinia Ashcombe shall assume supervision of household expenditure, tenant rents, agricultural contracts, and all estate accounts beginning immediately. Evelyn felt every gaze settle upon her. Lavinia would receive authority over the system Evelyn had rebuilt across 11 exhausting years. She would control the granaries Evelyn had replenished, the leases Evelyn had renegotiated, and the emergency fund created from the sale of Evelyn's emerald necklace. Alistair extended his hand. "The keys." Evelyn looked at him. "You have not examined the evidence I brought you." "I have examined enough." "No, you listen to Lavinia. She is my family." The answer struck more deeply than if he had shouted. Evelyn was his wife. She had buried 2 unborn children beneath the yew trees behind the chapel. She had slept beside him through fevers, protected his tenants through failed harvests, and prevented his ancestral home from being sold to creditors. Yet with 3 quiet words, Alistair placed her outside the circle of his loyalty. Evelyn removed the ring of iron keys from her waist. Instead of giving them to Lavinia, she placed them upon the marble table between them. The sound echoed through the hall. "There are 47 active leases," Evelyn said. 9 grain contracts expire before Michaelmas. The northern mill requires repairs, and the payment to the canal company is due on Monday. Lavinia lifted her chin. "I am not incapable, Evelyn. Then you will know which tenants have already paid." A flush crept into Lavinia's cheeks. Alistair stepped between them. "Enough. You will leave Blackmere within 48 hours." The housekeeper gasped. Evelyn's composure nearly broke, but she refused to give Lavinia the satisfaction of seeing it. "And where do you expect me to go?" "The dower cottage at Alder Fen is available." Alder Fen had been empty for 9 years. Its roof leaked, its chimneys smoked, and the surrounding land flooded every winter. "You are sending your wife to a ruined cottage," Evelyn said, "because she asked where your money went." "I am protecting this family from your obsession with control." Evelyn opened the ledger and withdrew 6 payment orders. "These carry your signature." Together they transferred nearly £20,000 into accounts controlled by men who do not exist. Alistair glanced at them, but did not take them. "I authorized payments at Lavinia's recommendation." "Without reading them?" His silence gave her the answer. For one brief instant, uncertainty crossed his face. He could have accepted the papers. He could have called Bellamy forward and demanded an investigation. He could have chosen truth over pride. Instead, Lavinia touched his arm. "Alistair, she is trying to frighten you because she cannot bear losing authority." His uncertainty vanished. "Any attempt to contact Blackmere's creditors after tonight will be treated as interference with ducal affairs," he said. "You will surrender every account book before you leave." Evelyn closed the ledger. "Then whatever follows will belong to you." She turned away before anyone could see her eyes fill. 2 hours later, she entered her private study for the final time. The shelves had already been emptied. Her correspondence lay in open boxes, and the desk where she had saved Blackmere from bankruptcy was stripped bare. Someone had searched the room. Evelyn knelt beside the lowest cabinet and reached underneath it. Her fingers touched a loose floorboard. She pried it upward and found a small wooden horse hidden in the dust. It had belonged to Edmund. She remembered seeing him carve it during the final summer of his life, when gambling debts and drink had hollowed his face. Why would he conceal it in her study? A narrow seam ran along the toy's belly. Evelyn pressed it with her thumbnail, and a hidden compartment opened. Inside lay a folded strip of paper, covered in Edmund's private cipher. She carried it to the window and began translating. The first entries recorded secret payments from villages that had officially ceased paying rent years earlier. Beside each sum appeared the same symbol, a broken crown. Then she reached the final line, Lady Lavinia Ashcombe, completion before October 14th. Evelyn looked at the calendar on her desk. October 14 was 12 days away. Footsteps stopped outside the study. The door handle turned slowly, although Evelyn had locked it from within. Someone already knew what she had found. Evelyn folded the ciphered paper into her sleeve and closed the wooden horse just as the door shuddered beneath a second attempt. "Who is there?" "It is only me, Your Grace." The voice belonged to Martha Finch, Evelyn's personal maid of 8 years. Evelyn crossed the room and unlocked the door. Martha stumbled inside, carrying an empty traveling case, her round face pale with alarm. "I saw someone coming down this corridor," Martha whispered. "A man in a dark coat. He slipped through the servants' staircase when he noticed me." "Did you recognize him?" "No, Your Grace, but he was wearing riding boots covered in red clay." There was no red clay near Blackmere Hall. The nearest deposits lay around Millcross, one of the villages that had officially stopped paying rent 4 years ago. Evelyn glanced toward the loose floorboard. Whoever had searched her study might have known Edmund had concealed something there. If Martha had arrived minutes later, the wooden horse could have been taken. "Pack only what we can carry ourselves," Evelyn said. "We are leaving tonight. His Grace gave us until tomorrow evening." "Which means someone expects me to remain here until then." Evelyn placed the toy inside her traveling case, beneath 2 folded gowns. She kept the ciphered paper against her body. Martha hurried to the wardrobe, but stopped when she saw how little remained. "They have already taken your winter cloaks." "On whose orders?" Lady Lavinia said they belonged to the Blackmere household. Evelyn almost laughed. She had purchased those cloaks with money inherited from her mother, but arguing over clothes would only delay them. "Find Mr. Bellamy," she said. "Ask him to meet us beside the east gate in 20 minutes. Tell no one else." Martha nodded and left through the connecting chamber. Evelyn opened the final drawer of her desk. Inside lay a bundle of personal letters tied with faded blue ribbon. At the bottom was a miniature portrait of Alistair, painted during their first year of marriage. He was smiling in it, not the practiced smile he offered Parliament, but the unguarded one she had once believed belonged only to her. She turned the portrait face down and left it behind. When she reached the east gate, Bellamy was waiting beneath an elm tree with his hat pulled low. Martha stood beside a small carriage, arguing with the coachman over the luggage. "I cannot oppose a direct order from the Duke," Bellamy said as Evelyn approached. "I am not asking you to oppose him. I am asking whether Edmund's private obligations were ever registered with the estate. Not through my office." "Did you witness the transfer of authority to Lady Lavinia?" Bellamy's mouth tightened. "I witnessed His Grace sign the order. I did not draft it." "Who did?" "I was told it came from Mr. Silas Vane." Evelyn knew the name. Vane was a London financier who lent money to desperate noblemen at ruinous interest. Edmund had once sworn never to deal with him again. Why would Alistair accept a document written by Vane? Because Lady Lavinia claimed Mr. Vane had settled several of Lord Edmund's outstanding debts. His Grace considered it an act of loyalty. Or Alistair had wanted it to be loyalty badly enough that he refused to question the price. Evelyn drew one of the suspicious payment orders from her reticule. Examine the witness signature. Bellamy tilted the page toward the carriage lamp. Thomas Reed. Thomas Reed died 6 months before this was signed. The solicitor's face changed. I told Alistair, Evelyn continued. He refused to investigate. Tonight I found proof that rent is being collected from villages erased from the official accounts. Bellamy looked toward the house. If that is true, someone has concealed taxable income and diverted estate funds. The Duke's signature makes him responsible, whether he understood the documents or not. What happens on October 14th? Bellamy went still. You know something. The Blackmere entail is reviewed on that date, he admitted. It happens only when the estate's secured debts exceed a specified limit. If the limit has been crossed, creditors may petition for external administration. And who would become administrator? Traditionally, the nearest adult male relative, approved by the principal creditor. Edmund was dead. Alistair and Evelyn had no surviving child. The next male relative was Edmund's 8-year-old son, Henry. A child could not administer an estate. His mother could act for him. Lavinia, Evelyn said. Bellamy lowered his voice. If Blackmere is declared insolvent while Lady Lavinia controls the accounts, she could petition to manage the estate in Henry's name. The design became frighteningly clear. Lavinia was not merely stealing money. She was pushing Blackmere toward collapse, then arranging to control whatever remained. A horse cried out from the darkness. The carriage coachman collapsed beside the front wheel. Martha screamed. Evelyn ran to him and found blood spreading through his coat from a wound near his shoulder. An arrow had struck the carriage door inches from where she had been standing. Fastened to its shaft was a scrap of paper marked with a broken crown. Bellamy pulled Evelyn behind the carriage. Another rider thundered away along the eastern road. In the moonlight, Evelyn saw red clay flying from the horse's hooves. The wounded coachman seized her wrist. Millcross, he gasped. They took the rent books to Millcross. Then the lamps of Blackmere Hall flared behind them. Alistair emerged through the gate with armed servants, and Lavinia at his side. His gaze moved from the wounded man to the arrow in Evelyn's carriage. What have you done? He demanded. Before Evelyn could answer, Lavinia pointed toward the open traveling case. The wooden horse was lying on top of Evelyn's clothes, although Evelyn had buried it beneath them. Lavinia's face drained of color. That belonged to my husband, she whispered. She stole it from his death chamber. Alistair crossed the distance between them and lifted the wooden horse from Evelyn's traveling case. Where did you find this? In my study, beneath a loose floorboard. Lavinia pressed a hand to her chest. That is impossible. Edmund kept it beside his bed during his final illness. Then someone moved it after his death, Evelyn said. You did, Lavinia replied. You took it because you knew how much it meant to Henry. The accusation worked precisely as she intended. Alistair's expression hardened as he remembered his young nephew, the child who had lost his father and now depended upon Blackmere's protection. Evelyn stepped closer. Open the compartment beneath its belly. For a fraction of a second, Lavinia looked terrified. Then her face crumpled with grief. Must she tear apart everything Edmund loved? Alistair examined the toy. His thumb found the narrow seam, but Lavinia caught his wrist before he could press it. Please, she whispered. Give it to Henry. He has suffered enough. A groan came from the wounded coachman. Evelyn turned immediately. He needs a surgeon. Take him to the infirmary, Alistair ordered 2 footmen. No, Evelyn said. Someone has already tried to silence him. He stays where I can see him. You no longer command this household. But I know how to keep an injured man alive. The arrow had passed through the flesh below the coachman's shoulder without striking bone. Evelyn tore a clean strip from the lining of her traveling cloak and pressed it firmly against the wound. The man's eyelids fluttered. "What is your name?" she asked. "Samuel Pike." "Who attacked you?" He swallowed painfully. Did not see his face. "You mentioned Millcross." At the name, Lavinia's shoulders stiffened. Samuel's lips parted, but before he could speak, one of Alistair's servants offered him a silver flask. Evelyn struck it from the servant's hand. The flask hit the stones and spilled a stream of brandy. A sharp, bitter scent rose beneath the alcohol. "Laudanum." "Who gave you that?" Evelyn demanded. The servant stared at the flask. Lady Lavinia said it would ease his pain. Lavinia did not retreat. A wounded man requires relief. A man who has taken laudanum cannot give a reliable statement. Alistair looked from Lavinia to the spilled liquid. Uncertainty returned to his face, but only briefly. "You see schemes in every act of kindness," he told Evelyn, "and you see kindness wherever Lavinia instructs you to find it." His jaw tightened. "Bellamy, escort the Duchess to Alderfen. I am going to Millcross." "You are going nowhere near estate business." Evelyn rose, her hands stained with Samuel's blood. "A man has been shot at your gate. Rent has vanished. Your signature appears on documents witnessed by the dead. Yet your greatest concern remains whether I obey you. My concern is preventing you from creating further scandal." "No, Alistair. Your concern is avoiding the humiliation of admitting that you signed what you did not understand." The words struck him before the listening servants. Evelyn saw anger flare, the wounded pride that had guided nearly every decision since Edmund's death. "You will leave now," he said. "If you go to Millcross, I will have you brought back." Evelyn met his gaze. "Then send men you are willing to lose." She turned to Bellamy. "Can Samuel travel?" "If the bleeding stops, we will take him to Dr. Mercer in Ashford. Martha, bring the cases." Alistair moved in front of the carriage. The horses belonged to Blackmere. Evelyn stared at the man she had once loved. He had taken her authority, her home, her income, and even the coats purchased with her inheritance. Now he meant to strand her beside a wounded servant to prove that she possessed nothing outside his favor. Bellamy cleared his throat. "The grey mare and carriage were purchased from Her Grace's marriage settlement. They are legally hers." The servants lowered their eyes, but Evelyn saw several mouths tighten with suppressed satisfaction. Alistair stepped aside. Lavinia still held the wooden horse. While Alistair watched the wounded coachman being lifted into the carriage, she turned her back and pressed her thumb against the hidden seam. Evelyn caught her wrist. "Looking for something?" The women faced each other beneath the gate lamp. For the first time, Lavinia's mask slipped completely. The grief vanished from her eyes, leaving something cold and calculating behind. "You should have remained in your study," she murmured. "Was that where your rider intended to kill me?" Lavinia smiled faintly. "If someone wanted you dead, Evelyn, you would not be standing here." She released the toy. Evelyn took it from her and climbed into the carriage. Martha sat beside Samuel, holding pressure against his wound, while Bellamy took the coachman's seat. As they passed through the gate, Evelyn looked back once. Alistair stood beneath the Blackmere crest, watching his wife leave at the command he had given. Lavinia remained close beside him, one pale hand resting possessively upon the household keys. The road divided beyond the estate, west toward Alder Fen and east toward Ashford. Bellamy turned the carriage west. "Dr. Mercer lives in the other direction," Evelyn said. "I know. Then why are we going toward Alder Fen?" Bellamy's hands tightened around the reins. "Because the eastern bridge has been blocked. One of the stable boys warned me before we left." "Blocked by whom?" Before he could answer, flames appeared beyond the trees. They rose from the direction of Alder Fen. Evelyn's cottage, the only property Alistair had allowed her, was already burning. Then, Samuel Pike opened his eyes and seized her sleeve. "Not the cottage," he gasped. "They are burning the people inside it." Bellamy lashed the reins. The grey mare surged forward, dragging the carriage toward the burning cottage. Evelyn could already feel the heat when they reached Alder Fen. Flames poured through the lower windows, illuminating 3 shapes trapped behind an upstairs pane. "Children!" Martha cried. Evelyn jumped down before the carriage stopped. The cottage door had been secured from the outside with a heavy iron chain. "This was deliberate," Bellamy said. "Break the window." He seized a fallen branch and smashed the nearest pane. Smoke rolled outward. Evelyn wrapped her cloak around her face and climbed through before Bellamy could stop her. The entry hall was ablaze. Burning oil streaked across the floorboards, proving the fire had been set in several places. Above the crackle, Evelyn heard children coughing. She reached the stairs, but the lower steps collapsed beneath her. Flames leapt through the opening. "Your Grace," Bellamy shouted from outside. Evelyn searched desperately and saw a narrow servant's ladder hanging beside the pantry. She dragged it across the room, raised it against the upper landing, and climbed through the smoke. 3 children were huddled inside the rear bedroom. Evelyn recognized them as the sons and daughter of Jacob Hale, a tenant farmer from Millcross. "Where is your father?" "Men took him away," the eldest boy said. "They locked us here." The smallest child could barely stand. Evelyn lifted the girl into her arms and led the boys toward the ladder. Below them, the fire had spread across the entry hall. Bellamy appeared through the broken window with his coat wrapped around his head. Together, they lowered the children one by one. Evelyn descended last as the ceiling groaned above her. A burning beam fell behind them. Bellamy pushed Evelyn through the window and followed an instant before the staircase collapsed. They landed in the wet grass as sparks burst from the cottage roof. Martha gathered the children beneath a blanket. Why were they here? The eldest boy, Peter, pointed shakily toward Samuel Pike. "He brought us. Father told him to hide us somewhere Lady Lavinia's men would not look." Samuel closed his eyes in anguish. "I thought the cottage was empty." "Why were they in danger?" Evelyn asked. "Jacob kept copies of the rent collections," Samuel said. "Every month, men came to Millcross and demanded payment in the Duke's name. But the official records said the village owed nothing because its farms had been abandoned after the flood." "Who collected the money?" Samuel looked at the frightened children. "Mr. Silas Vane's agents, the London financier." Evelyn knelt before Peter. "Did your father give you anything before they took him?" The boy reached inside his shirt and removed a brass token stamped with a broken crown. On the reverse was a number, 417. Bellamy examined it. "A warehouse marker." "Where?" Evelyn asked. "Blackmere's old canal depot uses numbers like these. Warehouse 4, compartment 17. Samuel struggled to sit upright. "That is where they keep the real rent books." Hooves thundered along the road. Alistair arrived with 6 mounted servants, Lavinia following in a small carriage. He dismounted and stared at the burning cottage. When he saw Evelyn's soot-blackened face and the 3 rescued children, shock displaced his anger. "What happened? Someone chained them inside and set the cottage on fire," Evelyn said. Alistair looked toward the ruined doorway. The melted chain remained visible around the iron handles. Lavinia stepped from her carriage. "How dreadful. We must return the children to their father immediately." "Their father has been abducted," Evelyn replied. Lavinia's gaze shifted to Peter. "Then they should come to Blackmere. I will care for them." All 3 children recoiled. Peter pointed at her. "She came to our house." Silence fell. Lavinia gave a soft, sorrowful laugh. "The poor child is confused." "You wore a green dress," Peter insisted. "You told father that if he gave you the copied books, you would forgive the rent." Alistair turned toward Lavinia. "I have never been to Millcross," she said. "Then how did Peter recognize you?" Evelyn asked. "You have coached him." "I met him less than 10 minutes ago." Alistair rubbed a hand across his face. Evelyn saw the first real fracture in his certainty, but Lavinia quickly moved beside him. "This fire began after Evelyn disobeyed your order," she murmured. "Is it not convenient that she now has frightened children repeating accusations against me?" Alistair did not answer. Evelyn stepped toward him. "Search the canal depot, warehouse 4, compartment 17. Based on the word of an injured coachman and a terrified child? Based on evidence you have refused to examine since the beginning. Lavinia reached for Alistair's hand. If armed men are waiting there, you would be risking your servants' lives. Evelyn understood the fear beneath her warning. The evidence still existed. I will go myself, Evelyn said. You will do no such thing, Alistair replied. You dismissed me from Blackmere. You cannot remove my authority and still demand my obedience. I am your husband, and tonight you sent me to a cottage where someone intended to burn 3 children alive. Pain crossed his face. I did not know. That has become your defense for everything. A rider suddenly emerged from the darkness, racing toward them. He wore the livery of the Blackmere treasury. Your Grace, he shouted as he dismounted. Men broke into the estate office. They emptied the reserve chest and took the sealed account books. Alistair went pale. How much was in the chest? Nearly £15,000. Lavinia staggered against her carriage, as though overcome by shock. But Evelyn noticed a spot of red clay along the hem of her black gown, the same clay carried by the man who had searched Evelyn's study. Evelyn reached down and rubbed some of it between her fingers. Lavinia slapped her hand away. At that moment, the wooden horse fell from Evelyn's cloak and split open upon the ground. A second compartment, one neither woman had discovered, sprang loose. Inside was a tiny brass key bearing the number 417. Alistair stared at it. For the first time, he looked at Lavinia not as Edmund's helpless widow, but as a woman who might have lied to him. Then a gunshot echoed from the direction of the canal depot. A red flare climbed into the night sky. Samuel's face filled with terror. They are destroying the warehouse. Evelyn snatched up the brass key. If the rent books burn, we lose the proof. She ran toward Alistair's horse, but he caught her arm. You are injured. Only then did she notice blood running from a cut along her wrist. 3 children nearly died. I will survive a scratch. I am coming with you. Lavinia stepped between them. Alistair, this could be a trap. It probably is, Evelyn said. The question is who prepared it. Alistair ordered 2 servants to guard the children and lifted Evelyn onto his horse before mounting behind her. Bellamy followed on the spare mare while the other riders raced toward the canal. The depot stood beside dark water, its warehouse roof already burning. 2 masked men were rolling barrels toward the flames. Alistair's servants charged. One man fled along the towpath, the other threw a lantern through the warehouse window. Evelyn dismounted and reached the side door. The brass key opened compartment 17, revealing a narrow cabinet packed with ledgers. Take them outside, she shouted. Bellamy carried the first armful to safety. Evelyn opened a black ledger and found years of Millcross rent payments recorded under false village names. Each page bore a broken crown mark. Then she saw Alistair's signature, not copied, genuine. He found her staring at it. I signed those forms, he admitted. Lavinia told me they transferred Edmund's personal debts away from Henry. You transferred estate income to Silas Vane. I did not know. You did not ask. His face tightened, but this time he did not defend himself. A beam crashed behind them. Alistair pushed Evelyn through the doorway as sparks showered his coat. Outside, Bellamy spread the recovered records across the grass. These entries are enough to request an official inquiry, the solicitor said, but the most recent pages are missing. The pages proving who received the money, Evelyn replied. A servant dragged the captured attacker forward and pulled away his mask. Evelyn recognized him as George Talbot, one of Lavinia's coachmen. Alistair stared at the man. Who ordered this? Talbot looked toward the flames. I want protection. You will receive it if you tell the truth. Lady Lavinia sent us to empty the treasury and burn the ledgers. Mr. Vane promised us passage to France after October 14th. Alistair's face lost all color. Why that date? Talbot swallowed. The Duke's debts will be called in. Lady Lavinia will petition to manage Blackmere for her son. Mr. Vane will control the land through her. Evelyn had expected confirmation, yet hearing it still chilled her. Lavinia had used Alistair's grief and loyalty to place his estate in her hands. "Where is Jacob Hale?" Evelyn asked. "In the abandoned toll house north of Millcross." A second gunshot cracked from across the canal. Talbot jerked violently and collapsed. Blood spread across his chest. The hidden shooter vanished among the reeds before Alistair's men could reach him. Talbot seized Evelyn's sleeve with his remaining strength. "The boy is not Edmund's." "Henry?" Alistair whispered. Talbot nodded once. "Vane's son." His hand fell. Alistair stared at the dead man, devastated. Evelyn could see memories rearranging themselves behind his eyes. Edmund's sudden marriage, Lavinia's pregnancy, Vane's generous assistance, and every document he had signed to protect the child he believed carried his brother's blood. Bellamy opened another ledger. A loose page slipped free, bearing an order for £10,000. The signature belonged to Alistair. The stated purpose was the purchase of winter grain, but the money had gone to Silas Vane, and no grain had ever been delivered. "If this reaches the magistrate without the supporting accounts," Bellamy warned, "it will appear that His Grace stole relief money from his own tenants." Evelyn looked at Alistair. His choice had finally become more than a private betrayal. By giving Lavinia unchecked authority, he had placed every Blackmere family in danger. Hooves approached from the southern road. A royal messenger emerged carrying a sealed document. "By order of the Crown," he announced, "Duke Alistair Ashcombe must answer charges of fraud and misuse of tenant relief funds at the county hearing in 3 days." Evelyn saw the royal seal and understood the trap's next move. Lavinia had not merely planned to take Blackmere, she intended to send Alistair to prison first. The royal messenger handed Alistair the summons. "Until the hearing, the estate accounts are frozen. His Grace may not sell land, move funds, or destroy financial records." "Who filed the complaint?" Evelyn asked. "Mr. Silas Vane, principal creditor of Blackmere." Bellamy cursed under his breath. Vane had arranged the fraud, then reported it before anyone else could expose him. By presenting himself as the injured creditor, he could control the investigation. Alistair read the charges. "Every order bears my signature." "That was why Lavinia needed you," Evelyn said. "Your name made theft look lawful." He looked toward the burning warehouse. "I gave her access because Edmund made me promise to protect her." "You could have protected her without silencing me." The words landed heavily. "I was angry," he admitted. "You questioned Edmund's debts while he was dying. I believed you cared more about Blackmere's money than my brother. I questioned them because those debts threatened everyone living here. And I chose to believe you were cruel." Evelyn met his gaze. "Regret will not restore the stolen money or clear my name." Before Alistair could answer, a servant approached from the road. "Your Grace, Lady Lavinia has returned to Blackmere Hall. She has ordered the gates locked. She has no authority to lock me out." She showed the steward a legal order naming her temporary administrator, while Your Grace faces investigation. Bellamy examined the summons. Vane must have filed both petitions together. Alistair cannot manage the estate, and Evelyn was publicly dismissed. That leaves Lavinia. Everything had been timed precisely. "We need Jacob Hale," Evelyn said. "He can prove Vane collected rents under false names." They left the depot under guard and rode toward the abandoned toll house. At dawn, they found it beside the old northern road, its windows boarded and its door hanging open. Inside, a chair stood overturned beside lengths of cut rope. Jacob was gone. Evelyn searched the floor. Near the cold hearth lay a torn piece of a child's drawing. The image showed a black carriage beside a stone chapel. Peter's drawing. "Jacob left this deliberately," she said. "He knew we might find it." "There are 12 chapels on the estate," Alistair replied. "Only one beside a road wide enough for Vane's black carriage, the ruined chapel at St. Oran's." A small sound came from behind the wall. Alistair drew his pistol while Bellamy lifted a loose panel. An elderly clerk crawled from the narrow space, bruised and shaking. "My name is Nathan Cole," he said. "I kept accounts for Mr. Vane." "Where is Jacob Hale?" Evelyn asked. They took him to St. Oran's. Vane intends to force him to sign a statement claiming the Duchess ordered the illegal rent collections. Alistair's face hardened. Why Evelyn? Because she discovered the missing funds. If she is blamed, her testimony against Vane becomes worthless. Cole reached inside his torn coat and produced half of a receipt. This proves Vane purchased the false debt claims. The matching half identifies his partner, but Jacob hid it inside the chapel. "Will you testify?" Evelyn asked. The clerk looked terrified. "Vane has my daughter." A horse screamed outside. They rushed through the door. One of Alistair's servants lay unconscious, and Evelyn's carriage was racing away with the wooden horse still hidden beneath the seat. A masked rider followed it toward Blackmere Hall. At the same moment, church bells began ringing in the distance. Bellamy counted each strike. "Those are not mourning bells." "No," Evelyn said as the final toll faded. "They are summoning the tenants." Alistair understood. Lavinia is announcing something. A boy rode toward them, carrying a printed notice torn from the village square. Evelyn opened it. By authority of Lady Lavinia Ashcombe, all Blackmere tenant leases were cancelled. Every family was ordered to leave within 7 days, so the land could be transferred to Silas Vane. At the bottom appeared Alistair's seal. Above it was Evelyn's forged signature. Evelyn folded the eviction notice. "This is why they need Jacob's confession. Once he accuses me, Lavinia can claim I approved the evictions as part of the fraud." Alistair stared at Evelyn's forged signature. "My seal is genuine." Then Lavinia took it before locking you out. They rode toward St. Oran's Chapel. Along the road, frightened tenants were gathering with identical notices. Some carried children, others had loaded possessions onto carts. When they recognized Evelyn, anger rose through the crowd. "You sold us to Vane," a farmer shouted. "My wife signed nothing," Alistair declared. The crowd fell silent. Only hours earlier, he had publicly stripped Evelyn of authority. Now he was defending her. Evelyn held up the notice. "The signature is forged. Give me 3 days, and I will prove it." "Why should we trust either of you?" another tenant demanded. "You should not trust our titles," Evelyn replied. "Trust what we do next." She asked them to send 2 elected witnesses with her to St. Oran's. Thomas Gray, a miller, and Mrs. Webb, the village midwife, volunteered. They reached the ruined chapel shortly before noon. The doors were barred from within. Alistair's servants broke them open. Jacob Hale was tied beside the altar. Silas Vane stood behind him with a pistol, while 2 armed men guarded the side aisle. "Put down your weapons," Vane ordered, "or Hale dies." Alistair stepped forward, but Evelyn caught his arm. "Jacob hid something here," she whispered. "Keep Vane looking at you." Alistair raised his hands. "You used my brother's widow to steal from my estate." Vane smiled. "I offered Lavinia a future. You supplied the signatures." While they spoke, Evelyn moved behind a collapsed screen. Peter's drawing had shown a small cross beneath the chapel window. She found the same cross carved into a floor stone. Beneath it lay the missing half of Cole's receipt. Evelyn unfolded it. The document named Lavinia as Vane's partner and promised her control of Blackmere after Alistair's conviction. It also recorded payments made before Edmund's death. Lavinia and Vane had begun their plan while her husband was still alive. A shot exploded. Alistair had rushed Vane. The ball grazed his shoulder, but he drove the financier against the altar. The tenants' witnesses freed Jacob while the servants overpowered Vane's men. Vane escaped through a broken side door, mounted a hidden horse, and fled toward Blackmere Hall. Evelyn pressed a cloth against Alistair's wound. "You could have been killed. I have spent months allowing others to suffer for my choices. One reckless act does not correct them." "I know." Jacob approached, barely able to stand. "Your Grace, Vane forced Lord Edmund to sign false debts. Lady Lavinia supplied him with medicine that kept him confused." "Poison?" Evelyn asked. "Not enough to kill him quickly, enough to make him dependent." Alistair closed his eyes. Jacob continued. Edmund discovered Henry was Vane's son. He hid proof inside the wooden horse, but Lavinia found out. The toy was now being carried toward Blackmere. Suddenly Mrs. Webb examined the receipt and pointed to a line near the bottom. This payment was made to Dr. Harcourt, she said. He signed Edmund's death certificate. Evelyn felt the full horror of the scheme. If Edmund had been poisoned, the conspiracy was no longer only fraud, it was murder. Then the chapel doors opened, and young Henry stood outside alone, trembling in his nightclothes. "My mother sent me," he whispered. "She said if Duchess Evelyn wants the wooden horse, she must come to Blackmere without soldiers." Around his neck hung Alistair's missing ducal seal. Evelyn knelt before Henry. "Did your mother hurt you?" He shook his head, though tears streaked his face. "She said Uncle Alistair would hang because of you." Alistair flinched. Despite learning that Henry was not Edmund's son, he removed his coat and wrapped it around the boy. "None of this is your fault," he said. Henry pulled a folded message from his nightshirt. Lavinia demanded that Evelyn enter Blackmere alone before sunset. In return, she would surrender the wooden horse and the missing account pages. "It is a trap," Bellamy said. "Yes," Evelyn replied, "but Lavinia believes the horse contains the only proof against her." Jacob pointed toward the chapel roof. "There is an old drainage tunnel beneath Blackmere's west wall. Vane's men used it to move the stolen rents." Evelyn formed a plan. She would approach openly while Alistair, Bellamy, and the tenant witnesses entered through the tunnel. Nathan Cole and Jacob would remain under guard until the hearing. At sunset, Evelyn stood before Blackmere's locked gates. Lavinia waited on the balcony holding the wooden horse. "You came without soldiers? I came for the records. You came because without them, everyone will believe you stole the relief money." The gates opened. Evelyn entered alone and was taken to the great hall where her humiliation had begun. Now the servants were gone. Silas Vane stood beside the fireplace, his pistol trained upon her. "You should have gone quietly to Alder Fen," Lavinia said, "and allowed you to take the estate. I already have it. You have forged notices and stolen accounts. Nothing more." Lavinia's smile sharpened. "I have Alistair's signature on every crime and yours on every eviction." She placed the wooden horse on the table. "Where is the receipt Jacob hid?" "Safe." Vane cocked the pistol. "Then you are not." A faint scraping sounded beneath the floor, but Evelyn kept her eyes on Lavinia. "Edmund discovered Henry's true father," she said. "Was that why you drugged him?" Lavinia's expression changed. "He was weak," she replied. "He would have exposed me and left Henry penniless." "So you paid Dr. Harcourt to call his death natural." Vane stepped toward her. Enough. Evelyn had drawn the confession she needed, but only she had heard it. She needed witnesses inside the room. "Tell me one thing," Evelyn said. "Did Alistair ever suspect?" Lavinia laughed. "Alistair saw whatever grief allowed him to see. I mentioned Edmund's last wishes, and he signed everything." The fireplace panel burst open. Alistair emerged from the hidden passage with Bellamy, Thomas Gray, and Mrs. Webb behind him. Lavinia went white. "They heard you," Evelyn said. Vane fired. Alistair pulled Evelyn aside as the ball struck the table, splitting the wooden horse. Papers spilled from a hidden chamber inside its carved head. Vane lunged for them, but Bellamy reached them first. One was Edmund's handwritten statement identifying Henry as Vane's son. Another described the medicine Lavinia forced him to take. The final document was a list of every payment made to Dr. Harcourt. Outside, tenants began pounding upon the gates. Lavinia backed toward the staircase. Those papers proved nothing without the doctor. A servant suddenly entered, supporting a thin, terrified man. "Dr. Harcourt." "He arrived an hour ago," the servant said. "Lady Lavinia ordered us to lock him in the cellar." Harcourt looked at the scattered evidence and began to tremble. "I will testify," he said. "She poisoned Lord Edmund, but Mr. Vane chose the dose." Vane seized Lavinia around the waist and pressed his pistol to her throat. "If I fall," he shouted, "she dies first." Then the gates crashed open, and hundreds of Blackmere tenants flooded the courtyard. The sound of the collapsing gates rolled through Blackmere Hall like thunder. Silas Vane dragged Lavinia backward, keeping the pistol pressed beneath her jaw. Outside, tenants crowded into the courtyard carrying lanterns, farm tools, and the eviction notices bearing Evelyn's forged signature. Alistair moved between Vane and the entrance. "Release her." Lavinia stared at him in disbelief. "After everything you heard, you would still protect me? I will not permit another murder under my roof." Vane laughed. "There speaks the Honorable Duke of Blackmere, the man whose signature financed every crime." Alistair's face tightened, but he did not deny it. "The signatures are mine," he said. "So is the responsibility for giving you access to this estate." Evelyn watched him carefully. It was the first time he had admitted his culpability before witnesses instead of hiding behind ignorance. Vane pulled Lavinia toward the servants' corridor. "Order everyone away, or she dies." "Do as he says," Evelyn told the tenants gathering at the doors. Alistair glanced at her. "He will escape through the drainage tunnel. That tunnel opens beside the old canal lock." Thomas Gray understood. Without a word, the miller slipped back into the courtyard to warn the others. Evelyn stepped aside, clearing Vane's route. "You always were the practical one," he said. "No, I have simply learned what happens when a frightened man is allowed to believe he holds all the power." His smile vanished. Vane forced Lavinia into the corridor. Alistair followed at a distance, while Evelyn and Bellamy remained beside the broken wooden horse. Bellamy gathered Edmund's papers. These prove the conspiracy, but Vane will argue they were written by a sick and confused man. Then we need the account pages and Harcourt's testimony. Dr. Harcourt stood trembling near the fireplace. Evelyn faced him. "You will tell the magistrates exactly what medicine you gave Edmund, how often you gave it, and who paid you. If I testify, I will hang. If you remain silent, Vane will blame you for everything." Harcourt looked toward the corridor through which Vane had escaped. "Lady Lavinia first asked me to keep Edmund calm. She said he became violent after discovering her affair. I gave him laudanum. And later, Vane ordered me to add antimony. Small amounts at first. It caused vomiting, weakness, and confusion." "Who administered the final dose?" Harcourt lowered his eyes. "Lavinia." Henry stood near the doorway, still wrapped in Alistair's coat. He had heard every word. "My mother killed Father Edmund," he whispered. Lavinia had lied to the child about his father, used his inheritance claim, and placed him at the center of her scheme. Yet Henry was innocent of all of it. Evelyn crossed the room and knelt beside him. "Your mother made terrible choices," she said gently, "but you are not responsible for them. Will they hang her?" Evelyn could not offer a false promise. "The court will decide." Martha led Henry upstairs, away from the gathering witnesses. A shout came from beneath the house. Evelyn, Bellamy, and several tenants hurried through the fireplace passage. The tunnel descended toward the canal, its walls slick with damp earth. Ahead, a lantern swung wildly. They reached the exit as Vane pulled Lavinia onto the towpath. Thomas Gray and 20 tenants were waiting beside the canal lock. Vane turned, trapped between them and Alistair. "You fools!" he shouted. "Without my money, Blackmere will collapse within a month." "Perhaps," Alistair said, "but it will no longer survive by stealing from its people." Vane's pistol shifted away from Lavinia for a fraction of a second. She drove her elbow into his ribs and tore herself free. The pistol discharged. The ball struck the wooden lock mechanism above the canal gate. A heavy chain snapped, and the gate shuddered under the pressure of the water. Vane ran onto the narrow maintenance bridge. The damaged gate burst open. A torrent surged through the channel, shaking the bridge beneath him. Vane lost his footing and caught the railing with one hand. "Help me," he screamed. Alistair moved toward him, but Evelyn saw Vane's other hand reaching inside his coat. "Stop." Vane drew a second pistol and aimed at Alistair. Lavinia seized a loose stone and struck Vane's wrist. The weapon fell into the rushing water. His remaining hand slipped from the railing. Alistair caught him by the arm. For several seconds, the two men hung above the canal, while the structure groaned beneath them. The tenants helped pull Vane onto the bank, where Bellamy bound his wrists. "He should have drowned," Lavinia said bitterly. Evelyn looked at her. Death would have spared him from answering publicly. Lavinia turned to run, but Mrs. Webb and two tenant women blocked her path. By midnight, the stolen account pages had been recovered from Lavinia's locked desk. They documented every false debt, diverted rent, and payment to Dr. Harcourt. More importantly, they proved that Lavinia and Vane had planned to bankrupt Blackmere before Edmund's death. The evidence was secured in separate boxes under the joint custody of Bellamy, Thomas Gray, and the Royal Messenger. No single person could destroy or alter it. As dawn approached, Alistair found Evelyn in the empty great hall. The household keys lay upon the marble table where she had surrendered them. He picked them up but did not offer them to her. "I have no right to ask you to resume the burden I took from you," he said. "No, you do not. The hearing begins tomorrow. I will confess that I signed the documents and publicly dismissed your warnings. That may cost you Blackmere. It should cost me something." Evelyn looked at the man she had loved and saw remorse in him, but remorse did not erase the moment he chose Lavinia's word over hers. It did not restore the home from which he had expelled her. "What happens to Henry?" she asked. "He will remain protected. Edmund raised him as his son, whatever his blood." It was the first decision Alistair had made that was guided neither by pride nor inheritance. A royal carriage entered the courtyard. The Crown's commissioner stepped down carrying another sealed order. Bellamy broke the seal and read it aloud. The county hearing had been moved to Blackmere so the tenants could testify publicly. Then he reached the final paragraph and stopped. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. Bellamy looked at Alistair. "Silas Vane has submitted a marriage certificate claiming that he and Lavinia were legally married before her wedding to Lord Edmund. If it is genuine, Henry is legitimate, but Lavinia's marriage to Edmund was fraudulent." Alistair's expression darkened. "What does that change?" Bellamy handed the document to Evelyn. "It means Vane is not merely Blackmere's creditor. Through Henry, he intends to claim part of the estate as family property, and he has asked the Crown to recognize him as its lawful administrator. The public hearing would not only decide who had stolen Blackmere's fortune, it would decide who owned Blackmere itself." The hearing opened the following morning in Blackmere's Great Hall. The same servants and tenants who had witnessed Evelyn's public dismissal now filled every bench. At the front sat the Crown's commissioner, two county magistrates, and a clerk responsible for recording every statement. Silas Vane entered under guard. Lavinia followed separately, dressed once more in mourning black. Alistair stood beside Evelyn, but she left a deliberate space between them. The commissioner examined Vane's marriage certificate. If this document is genuine, Lady Lavinia was already married when she wed Lord Edmund Ashcombe. Her son would therefore be legitimate to Mr. Vane, but would possess no claim through Lord Edmund. Vane smiled confidently. "Henry is my lawful son. As his father, I have the right to recover property stolen from our family." Evelyn rose. "No Blackmere property belongs to Henry through blood," she said, "and no property belongs to you through fraud." She placed the two halves of Nathan Cole's receipt before the commissioner. Together, they showed that Vane had purchased Edmund's gambling debts, then used them to force false transfers from the estate. Nathan Cole testified first. He identified the hidden accounts, the broken crown tokens, and the payments made to Lavinia. Jacob Hale followed, presenting copies of the Millcross rent books. The figures matched the ledgers recovered from the canal warehouse. "Duchess Evelyn never ordered those collections," Jacob said. "She was the first person who tried to stop them." Dr. Harcourt then confessed to drugging Edmund under Vane's instructions. His testimony was supported by Edmund's handwritten statement from the wooden horse and by payments recorded in Lavinia's private accounts. Finally, Mrs. Webb approached the table holding the marriage certificate. "I attended Lavinia before Henry's birth," she said. "This certificate claims she married Mr. Vane in Scotland 17 months before the child was born. But the paper bears the watermark of a mill that did not begin operating until 3 years later." The commissioner held the document toward the window. A faint date appeared within the paper. Vane's confidence vanished. "The certificate is forged," the commissioner declared. Lavinia turned upon Vane. "You said it could not be challenged. You were supposed to destroy the ledgers," he hissed. "Their exchange was recorded by the clerk." The commissioner ordered Vane charged with fraud, forgery, conspiracy, attempted murder, and the unlawful diversion of tenant funds. His properties would be seized to repay Blackmere and the affected villages. Lavinia was charged with conspiracy, forgery, attempted arson, and Edmund's murder. Her cooperation in capturing Vane would be considered, but it did not absolve her. Dr. Harcourt was taken into custody as an accomplice. Because he confessed and agreed to testify, the court would determine whether his sentence should be reduced. Then Alistair stepped forward. "I ask to make a statement." The commissioner warned him that his words could be used against him. "I understand." Alistair turned to face the household. "My wife found evidence of theft. I refused to examine it. She warned me that dead men appeared as witnesses on documents bearing my signature. I dismissed her warnings because pride made it easier to call her controlling than to admit I had been careless." The hall remained silent. "I surrendered authority to Lavinia, expelled Evelyn from her home, and threatened her for trying to protect the people I was sworn to serve. Every crime committed with my signature became possible because I chose loyalty without judgment and demanded obedience without offering trust." He placed his ducal seal before the commissioner. "I accept responsibility." The magistrates fined Alistair for negligent administration and suspended his control of the estate for 3 years. Blackmere would be managed by an independent council composed of the Crown's representative, 3 elected tenants, Bellamy, and 1 administrator selected by Evelyn. When the commissioner offered that final position to her, she did not immediately accept. "I will serve only if my authority is written, independent of my husband, and compensated from the estate," she said. "I will not return as an unpaid wife expected to repair what others destroy." The conditions were granted. All eviction notices were cancelled. The stolen rents were credited back to the villages. The reserve fund was restored from Vane's seized property, and Millcross returned to Blackmere's official accounts. Jacob Hale became its elected representative. Henry was legally declared innocent of the conspiracy. Edmund's will had left him a personal trust regardless of parentage, so Evelyn insisted it be preserved under court supervision. The boy was placed temporarily with Edmund's elderly aunt, safely beyond both Vane and Lavinia's influence. When the hearing ended, Alistair found Evelyn beside the marble table. The household keys rested where she had surrendered them. He picked them up and placed them before her. "These belong to Blackmere's administrator." Evelyn did not reach for them. "I will oversee the recovery for 3 years," she said. "But I will live at Hawthorne House, which will be purchased in my name with the marriage funds you withheld." Alistair bowed his head. "It will be done. And you will publish your statement in every village where you allowed my name to be accused. Yes. You will not ask me for forgiveness while I am still repairing the consequences of your choices." His voice was quiet. "I will not." For the first time, he offered no excuse, demand, or promise designed to change her decision. 3 months later, Blackmere's accounts returned to balance. The tenant council controlled every major expenditure, and no ducal signature could move estate funds without independent review. Alistair lived in a smaller wing of the house and worked under the council whose authority had replaced his own. Evelyn saw him at meetings, where he listened more than he spoke. His remorse remained his burden, not her obligation. On the first morning of winter, Evelyn entered the great hall before the assembled tenants. She lifted the household keys from the marble table, the same place where Alistair had once forced her to surrender them. Then she handed one key to each elected representative and kept only the key to the account room. Blackmere would never again depend upon one person's unquestioned power. Evelyn walked through the open doors toward her waiting carriage. She did not look back to see whether Alistair watched her leave. This time, she was not being expelled. She was going home.